Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. This show is not just about gang life, but about the moment somebody tried to change it. This right here, this one's about Joe. Not me, it's another Joe, y'all. He ain't never mean to be no savior, but he tried that. And for that, they tried to kill him. Joe stood at the top of the rooftop, staring down at the skyline of this city. The name of the city is called Crest, right? The home of the celebration and all the things that were going on the streets below had the lights and the cars and everything looking good, and everybody was waiting for that moment to announce the official start of what's known as citywide. See, a citywide is a weekend of prestige and pageantry and all that old kind of stuff where the 13 heads of the gangs come together on this one place, and it's one person out of all of them. He's the host of this, right? But to the police, it's a surveillance nightmare. They're trying to watch everything and see what's going on, right? But to Joe, it was the last stand before the war that he didn't mean to start. See, Big G, that's Ironcrest's Don. And this year, he was the host. Plus, he had sponsored Joe's education. He stepped out there and he said, "Our first college grad is in the set," he said, smiling wide, pride in his eyes. And Joe walked out onto the stage. You know what I'm saying? He had his bachelor's degree in his hand, and he was surrounded by enforcers in designer suits and everybody clapping like it was a coronation. But Joe hadn't come back to say thank you. He had come back to change the future. Now, earlier that day in the barbershop off Lamont Avenue, Joe sat in the chair while Twin, the barber, touched up his fade. The shop, it was a known front. It was buzzing with gossip and all this and that about what was going on, and you could hear the old school music in the background, you know, Ron DMC and all them just doing their thing, right? And here we go. So you really gonna do it? Twin asked while he was cutting his hair. You gonna say it tonight? Joe nodded, watching himself in the mirror. He said, "They need to hear it." "They gon' hear it," Twin muttered. "Then they gon' kill you." Joe didn't respond though. He thought about all the numbers, about all the stacks of cash laundered through the fake nonprofits, about the young dudes, you know, like Trey, Malik, and the Carter twins, all hustling but wishing they didn't have to. He thought about his spreadsheets, the LLC proposal, the blueprint for turning the gang into a legitimate multi-state logistics firm. He'd spend nights in the dorm thinking about it and sketching out the empire, how he wanted it to be, but it wasn't going to be based on an empire of fear. This was about business, distribution, ownership. It was possible. He had the proof. But power doesn't change easily. Now that night, the warehouse on East Canal, it was live. Everything was popping. And the stacking competition was the prelude to the main address. Once used, you know what I'm saying? Let me explain to y'all what stacking is, though. See, stacking is a combination of like breakdancing and sign language, but not the sign language that you see in the books and on TV. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about street signing, where it's going down right in front of everybody's faces, right? You know, and stacking, it had become like a tradition for the organization, right? But a lot of people had forgotten about it. Only the old heads knew what it was about, you know. So the crowd formed a big circle, you know what I'm saying, as the stacks was thrown and people was doing their thing, they were flipping and people was interpreting and all this and that. Some people saw art. Others saw warning shots. Now Joe stood behind the curtain with Big G. Big G talking to him. He said, "You sure you want to do this, little homie?" And he was sipping off something off, you know, in the cup, right? He was talking to him and looking at him at the same time. He said, "They ain't ready for all that corporate talk. They still live off the streets." So Joe leaned back against the brick wall. He said, "That's the problem." Big G got to laughing. "You got a heart. I respect that. But that heart might get you buried." Joe turned and looked his old boss in the eyes. He said, "Then let me get buried for doing what's right." Big G held his gaze and looked at him. He said, "Man, all right, go out there and say it then. But keep one thing in mind." Joe looked back at him and said, "What's that?" "They gonna stack back." And y'all need to understand what this stacking is. You're going to get a better understanding as the story goes on, so pay attention. So Joe stepped out onto the stage. Everybody clapping and cheering and everything like that. And then, the spotlight hit him, right? He about 6'1". He had on this suit, you know what I'm saying? And he had to open over this red t-shirt with the faded gang emblem on the chest stud, right? And his voice came out slow, deliberate. He said, peace to the brothers, peace to the 13, and peace to Big G. Then he paused, he's scanning the room. You got to scan the room when you're talking to people, right? You got to let everybody know that it's me and you. You understand? And then he said, my name is Joe. You know me. Some of y'all watched me grow up on this block. Some of y'all sponsored me to be here. Then he walked back and forth across the stage. He's looking and eyeing everybody. He's getting that eye contact with everybody. And he keeps on talking. He said, we built something powerful. Something that spreads from Ironcrest to Baton Rouge to Compton to Detroit to Queens. But power without purpose burns out. I came to say this. And that's when everything got silent. I'm talking about, you could hear a pin drop. It's time we evolve. Not just survive, but own. It's time we stop running from the law and start writing it. I'm talking about corporations. I'm talking real estate. I'm talking supply chains, logistics, warehouse, security, legal money, legal moves, long-term wealth, that legacy money, y'all. Then the silence got more intense. He saw it. He looking at he saw it on the older Don's faces, the old heads, you know what I'm saying? They looking skeptical about it and they looking pissed off at the same time. But then he looking and he's seeing the younger ones. And the younger ones, he saw that fire. They were eager. They want to hear what he's talking about. So he kept on. He looked at him. He said, look, y'all gave me a chance. Let me give you a future. And he ended what he had to say with the gang's creed. The original creed, going way back. He knew what he was doing. He said prosperity, loyalty, legacy. Then he stepped down, but his heart is beating. It's beating hard out his chest. It's like, oh my goodness, I really did it. I got it out. Everybody know what it is, right? Now behind the stage, everything was moving. It was still moving, and it was this dude named Slag. Slag was an OG from the 90s and Big G's right hand for 3 decades. 3 decades. Slag leaned into a circle of all the old vets. A dude named Reese, OG Blanco, and Auntie Red. He said too much, Slag told him. He got these young dudes dreaming. Talking LLCs like the keys to the kingdom. You know what I'm saying? They ain't the keys to the kingdom. We already got the keys to the kingdom. Can't trust that, said Auntie Red, adjusting her shades. He threatening the balance. Slag gave the signal. It wasn't a word. It was a series of stacks. That's what I'm talking about, y'all. Them hand signals that he was throwing, right? A lot of people didn't know it. The new generation, they wasn't aware of it. But the vets, they knew what it was. It meant handle him tonight. During the final stack, no mess. No noise, just tradition. Now in the parking lot, Malik, he just 17. He was leaning against that little Dodge Charger, eyes wide open. He said, Trey. He tugging at his friend's sleeve, pulling on, trying to get his attention. He said, man, did you see the speech? Joe really gonna flip the game. And Trey, he was older by about a year. He was smart. He was smarter than most, and he stayed quiet. He said, man, you ain't excited, Malik? I am, Trey said, but you don't know what they plotting. These OGs don't just roll over. They'll race dudes for way less than this. They shared that look, the vibe, that feeling you get, it was shifting, and everybody felt it. Everybody knew what was about to happen. Something was gonna go down. Now the final stacking battle, you know what I'm saying, it had begun. The music was bumping, man. I'm talking about this bumping. They out there doing their things, and then all the dancers, they hit the floor in pairs though. Everybody twisting and locking, then stacking and all that stuff. Everybody wrist bend. You know how the fingers is moving and all this, and they popping all of these secret codes, right? They communicating to each other and to the crowd. And then Joe, he stepped up for the final round. The crowd just shot out. Everybody just hollered. Then here come the challengers. Slag, Blanco, then Auntie Red. The crowd went silent. This wasn't a show, y'all. This was a warning. They began stacking, they hitting it up. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all old heads out there, part of the business. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stacking, you know what I'm saying? But they wasn't dancing. They just hitting it up. And Joe, because he studied it, he recognized the hand signs. They were subtle, lethal. It was a silent language from long before his time. It wasn't just a performance. It was a code. It was a code for execution. Joe's eyes scanned the room. He looking around. He trying to see. Then he seen 3 armed hitters. You know, they were posted up at the doors. Wasn't no way out. The music, ain't nobody paying attention. So as they closed in, wasn't nobody paying no attention to that because the music had everybody moving around and stuff, but he couldn't run. So he stacked back. He hit them back up. It wasn't for defense though. It was for communication. He signed out to the crowd, to his guys. Everybody heart beating. Changes now. Watch him. He letting them know. A beat later, Trey and Malik caught it. They had studied the old language with Joe in secret sessions, so they knew what was going on. In the crowd, a ripple began, and the young stackers, they started to respond, mimicking Joe's sign, redirecting attention. The stage exploded into chaos, not with gunfire though, y'all, but with rebellion. The younger ones were stacking back. They wasn't going. All of a sudden, gunfire erupted anyway though. The shots rang out. It missed Joe by inches, I'm telling you now. Now Big G, his security rushed the stage. Auntie Red, she's faded away, you know what I'm saying? While all the smoke was up, she got on down just like some kind of magician, right? She got all the way out the way. But Slag, he caught one in the shoulder. Blanco, he made his way out the back. He gone. But Joe didn't run. He stood in the middle of the ring. And all these young dudes, they got all around, guarding him like he was a king on a chessboard. About an hour later, in a back room, it was lit, you know what I'm saying, with that fluorescent light. It was real dim. Y'all know how the scene is, right? Joe sat there. He breathed real hard, a towel around his neck. Big G stood over him, looking at him, holding a drink, shaking his head at him. You stirred the hornet's nest, little homie. Then Joe looked up at him. He said, I stirred the truth. G nodded to him. This don't end here. The 13 gonna want your head. Some of these young ones gonna die for you. Joe wiped his face. Then maybe they'll die for something that matters. Now, once they got outside of Ironcrest, you know what I'm saying, it wasn't about, all the other stuff, right? But in the darkness, somewhere in the network of the 13 cities, the whispers, they started to spread. Joe tried to flip the whole damn game, they were saying. Everything was changing. And that morning, later that morning, at the citywide, everything was up in the air. Everything was changing. It was like a storm was disguising the sunshine. In the city, it seemed as though everything was united. It seemed like it, but beneath that glittering surface, old grudges and power plays stirred like oil in a hot skillet. In the Ironcrest district, the streets smell like heat and hustling. You know what I'm saying? You know how it is when you're out there, right? Kids in the white t-shirts, darting here and there, running around the hydrants and all of that, screaming and having fun. Everybody's playing. The barber shops was on buzz. Everything was cool. Everybody trying to get their hair cut, right? But the old heads, they out there, they playing dominoes. Beer on the table and a pistol ain't too far away. They can reach that just by putting their hand out. But on the surface, everything looked like it was peaceful. But it wasn't. But everyone knew it. It was only the calm before the storm. It was the calm before the stacking, because it's coming. Joe stood on the porch at his grandma's house, drinking black coffee, no sugar. The bitter taste, he liked that, it kept him grounded, you know what I mean? He was watching the neighborhood wake up, the people he was trying to save, and the same ones who might line up to kill him in the streets if he decided, that something was against them, they were going to get him. He was wondering whether he on the wrong side of history on this one. His cousin Drake pulled up, he dancing to the, that beat got it going on in that Tahoe. He pulled up in and the people around in the streets, they looking at him. Then he rolled the window down, and when he rolled the window down, he said, "You still planning to show up at the stacking like it's a TED Talk?" Drake looking at him, shaking his head. Joe cracked a smile. "Ain't no TED Talk. It's a takeover." Drake leaned back. "Man, you got vision. But let me tell you something, young. Vision don't stop no bullets." Joe took one last sip. Then he balled the cup up in his hand and said, "Nah, but it give him purpose." And later that day, Joe gathered up with some of his most trusted. Everybody that he really trusted with his life. They all in this boarded up building out there in Ironcrest. It's a part of the town that everybody don't forget about. They don't know about this area. But Joe, he know every part of every crack, everywhere you can run and hide. He know everything about this area. Dre, he there. Monique, she there. She used to be in the army. She's street smart though. I'm talking about she's street smart. She know what she doing, right? And he got one dude named Dram. He real quiet. Set Dram, right? He real quiet. He calculating. Deadly when it comes to that pistol play. I'm talking about deadly. And then his right-hand man, Khalif. He been loyal since day one. These ain't just shooters. Joe looking at them, right? These the people he gonna build this new thing on. These the ones gonna be there with him. Come hell or high water. Ain't nothing gonna run these guys off. They down for him. All of them. Now, the map of the citywide arena, it was laid out on this table, right? They looking at it. And they trying to figure out, from a military standpoint, they doing their thing, right? Because Monique understand all this, right? She looking at all the exits, the blue lines, the red lines, the blind spot, the choke points, all of these different things that you need to know when you going into an area. Because when you go in somewhere, one thing you better remember, y'all, you better always make sure you got a way back out. And Joe circled them 3 zones, right, with the marker. And he said, they're going to try something right here during the stacking. I ain't just showing up. We ain't going to just do that. He said, well, we finna put together the counterattack plan right now. So Khalifa, he leaned and looked at the thing, right? He said, how deep you want to go? Joe looked around at everybody's faces. He wanted everybody to understand what this was all about. He looking around at everybody's faces. You know what I'm saying? And these are the few people he trusted in the whole city. And he looked at him, he said, we're going all the way. We're not just surviving this. We're turning it into a movement. We finna change the game. Everybody looking. Now Monique, she tapping the edge of the table and she looking at him. She said, a movement is one thing. But you got dudes who've been praying for your fall since you leaned back, you know what I'm saying, and put yourself out there on that stage and said you wanted to do this. How you do this? How do you make people understand that's been eating off the streets that this is the best move? They playing chess, not checkers. Joe nodded. Then let's start moving like kings then, if we gonna do this. If we ain't gonna do it this way, then we might as well abandon this right now. Now listen, y'all. You're gonna have to tune in to the next episode, right? Because this thing finna get better and better. We stacking, y'all. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.